right, Jose. Like it, man. Boost it up a little bit. Let's go. Good stuff. Welcome, 2509. It is great to see everybody here on a Friday afternoon. It's beautiful. Beautiful here in Pittsburgh, but I got to tell you, if you're on the eastern half of the United States, it feels like the Congo out here. It is hot beyond belief and crazy. So I'm glad I'm in air conditioning. Ain't working outside today. But listen, great to have you guys. We will get into today's session. Today's session is about financing the business. I noticed that some of you have already had your step 6 calls, which is your financing calls with your coaches. Part of that is going to be the option for you to have a referral to an accounting, a CPA that will give you a free 1-hour session that will yield your proposed entity formation. So that's like LLC or corporation, your desired, probably the most advantageous way of funding your business or a recommendation for that, along with some good tax strategies. And that's one of the real benefits of business ownership. One of the side benefits, the icing on the cake, is there are ways to have a tax strategy, more tools in the toolbox for ultimately paying less taxes, I guess is the way to say it, or deferring. So good stuff, and we're very fortunate to have our great partner, Mackenzie Swanson, here with us today to join us. She's from the Reader Group, which is a franchise-focused CPA firm that we've been working very, very closely with for several years. They're fantastic. They are big enough to know lots and lots of stuff and have lots of resources, but small enough to give you some very intimate attention. So you will be afforded the opportunity to have a 1-hour one-to-one with either Mackenzie or or Michael or one of the other ones over there, but they're all fantastic. So thank you, Mackenzie, for joining us here today. And I'm going to turn it over here in a minute. But we're going to go over all this stuff. This is where we've been, and this is where we're going, right? We started this journey path back on the first day of summer, a little over a month ago. And our 10-week journey going through all the nooks and crannies up that beautiful mountain there to the summit, where we will be informed enough to make a decision on A, is franchising right for us? And secondly, have we found the right franchise that we are well suited for? That custom fitting suit that's so important. It's not about the franchise. It's less about the franchise. It's less about the franchisee. It's mostly about the match between those two entities. And so this matchmaking happens here. For perspective, it's important to see where we are in that journey path. So those 10 steps really break down in the top left of that slide, break down nicely into 3 major segments. That first segment, the steps 1 through 4, that's where we are really learning about ourselves, how we match up to potential franchises in the 6 categories that we use for matching: geographical, financial, right? Geographical, is it available in your area? Financial, do you have the resources to be able to pursue this? And then obviously your want. What do you want to get out of this business? Which is your why. What are some of your fears that you've got? Everybody's got fears. Everybody's got things that can hold them back. And so knowing those and matching those up with businesses that are going to be well suited for that are important. And then 5th and 6th are your skills and interests, right? 3 primary things that we need in a franchise business, 3 primary roles that we have as owners. One is to manage the resources of the business, which is kind of a quantitative, bookkeeping, accounting, just kind of knowing the numbers in a very analytical kind of a path. The second one is leading our employees. And the third one is more of an external role. It's kind of a sales and business development role, representing our business to the community at large and sort of outside stakeholders, including customers. So that's really what skills and interests is all about. And then the 6th way that we do this matching is really around your lifestyle. So lifestyle is important. A lot of people don't think about that. They're like, hey, I want to start a restaurant business because I like to eat Chick-fil-A, or I like, McDonald's, or whatever it is. And that's the worst reason to do it. That business, if you don't like to work nights and weekends, have low margins, have a lot of risk, and have teenagers giving your profits to their friends at the drive-through, then, that might not be the right business for you. So the lifestyle is very, very important, and matching up to that. So this is all, really what we're doing in those first 4 steps, right? Introspection, learning about ourselves, learning about some franchises that we feel like, and your coach feels like through that science and experience match up well with you. From there, we start that second phase, which is right now we're kind of in the middle of that. That second phase is about due diligence. It's going external, right? It's not just you and your coach now. Your coach is now introducing you to other people outside of this organization. That's going to be franchisors. It's going to be CPAs like Mackenzie's firm. It's going to be, it's going to be loan specialists ultimately, if you choose that route, or people that can help you with the ROBs, or people that can help you with the setup of an LLC. It's going to involve validation, which is when we get to talk to other franchise owners in the system. You're going to talk to the leadership of that franchise. So all of that is that external due diligence, step 5 through 8, where we're really external and field testing those 1 or 2 options that we felt like you were well suited for. And then the final step 9 and 10, is that final phase. We'll get to that towards the end of August and leading into September. That's when we get to see what the franchise thinks of us and what we think of the franchise. And so if you make it beyond step 8, and the franchise thinks that you're a good candidate for leading one of their franchise territories in their system, they'll invite you to what's called that Discovery Day. Also, by the way, Discovery Day, there's like a million words for it. You'll hear it referred to as Meet the Team Day. You'll hear it referred to as Confirmation Day, and probably there's a few others as well. But it's all the same thing. It's when you get to, if you accept that invitation to Discovery Day, it's usually a half or a full day immersion, sometimes virtual, sometimes in person, where you get to meet the entirety of that leadership team and really talk through, make sure that this is the right thing for you, and be able to confirm. It's called Confirmation Day at times, because you're confirming all of the stuff that you've learned throughout due diligence and making sure that this is a good step. If after Confirmation Day or Discovery Day, the franchise thinks that you're well suited for them, and they will then make an offer to have you join the franchise. So they'll offer or not. If they offer, typically you'll have 7 to 10 days to either accept that offer or to decline it. So that's how the process works in those 3 phases, right smack in the middle of it right now with due diligence. So hopefully you guys are getting a lot out of this. Okay, Sherry, next slide. This is where we are right now. So most of you are really kind of right where you should be. 5, 6, 7, 8 is the heart of due diligence. And that's where the majority of you are. Those of you who are still there in discovery call and presentation of options, there is still time to kind of catch up and get the most out of the class from being, timed well with the other folks in the group. But it's probably time to get those scheduled as soon as possible and move on to the next phases. Okay, without any further ado, I'd love to introduce Mackenzie Swanson, again from Reader Group CPA. She's a wealth of information. We'll have some time to take questions. If you'd like, while she's talking, please put those in the chat and I'll interrupt her as necessary, or we may get to those towards the end. But anyway, Mackenzie, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone, for joining today, for having me here and being willing to kind of listen to my spiel here. And before I jump in, I just want to say that whole process that Chris outlined that you guys are working through it's really cool to see, right? Because we've worked with franchises for over a decade now, and the reality of it is there's good franchise investments and there's those that don't work out. And I think those of you going through a program like this, really setting the stage, finding a good fit for you and finding a brand that's reputable, going to support you and has all the right things, is just one of those really, really good catalysts to determine if you're going to succeed in this industry and if not. So it's great that you guys are here. It's great that you're going through this program. Hopefully you're taking the due diligence piece of this, really to heart and working with some of these experts like a CPA or anyone else you get introduced to, because a lot of us we've seen a lot of people come through this process, and we have a lot of good advice to give you guys, and we can answer those questions that are kind of bouncing around in your head. So that's kind of what my goal is here today. Like Chris said, I'm from Reader CPA Group. I work alongside Michael Reader, and we've been working with franchises for over a decade, a very long time. And so we really like to be a part of this group. It's an honor to be here speaking to you guys, because we have a lot of insight we can put forth and share that'll help you guys just, put those building blocks together to make sure that once you open the doors and things are starting to roll, snowball faster and faster, that you're set up for success in all facets, right? So from a financing perspective, what we're talking about is how you fund the business, what sources of your personal assets, balance sheet that you're leveraging, or what outside debt that you're leveraging to fund the business to get things off the ground and make sure that you have, working capital, the cushion you need to be successful in that first 6 months, 12 months of operation. So we're going to really talk about, what your options are broadly in this presentation today. And then hopefully what I want to do is just kind of catalyze that conversation so you can take it to either that free consultation with us that all of you will have the opportunity to take advantage of, or another conversation with a financial expert and know what to bring to the table to make sure that you're getting the right information to make that critical first decision about getting those funds into the business. And then we're going to talk about entity structure, right, from a tax perspective, what's efficient, what's going to give you the protection and the flexibility to succeed from the perspective of how you set up that business with the state. And then we'll talk about a few other things that can really drive success that you should be aware of and on top of as you gear up for operations. So really the main goal is here for you to take away just what topics should I be thinking about? What information do I need to consider? And how would someone like us, like a CPA, go about having a consultation with you to find that perfect mix of funding strategy, entity structure? And so that's what the goal is here today. So feel free to shoot any questions in the chat. As Chris said, if it's super specific, we might save it for your consultation, but if it's broad enough that it might help the group, definitely can dive into anything that's on your mind or that my comments here kind of like spark in your brain as we go through. So don't have any reservations about interrupting there. But we're going to start here with financing, right? So where do we get that lump sum of cash to put into the business at the beginning to get things off the ground? And there's a ton of options out there, right? Depending on who you talk to, they might push certain things your way, but it's really important to know the entire scope of what's available to you. So if you come into a consultation with Reader CPA Group, we're going to start by asking you for some information. So this is what you should bring to us or any other financial expert that you're going to have this conversation with. And that's going to be, number one, what is your projected initial investment, right? So the lump sum amount that you're going to need, inclusive of franchise fees, initial equipment purchase, anything that the franchise requires, plus 6 to 12 months, probably closer to 12 months of working capital to cover all expenses. So you don't have to dip into your personal cash or anything else for 12 months of the first business operations. So we're going to ask what that number is. You should be able to get a good idea from the FDD, from talking to your franchisor, but it's important to know what that goal line is, right? Where do we need to get with this funding conversation? And then we'll want to know what portion of that is the franchise fees and talk about a lot of times, those are due on a different timeline. So how are we going to make sure that we have the cash? Where are we going to leverage ourselves to be able to pay those franchise fees? So once we know what that initial investment looks like, we're going to ask you about your personal balance sheet, right? So we want to know what assets do you have at your disposal, from cash and savings, liquid investment accounts, real estate, retirement, anything else that you could possibly pull from or leverage to get the right funding mix for you. We want to see all of that out on the table so we can walk through every option and kind of drill down to what's going to be the best situation for you. For most people, it's not a one size fits all answer. It's not HELOC, SBA. It's really a combination of 2 or 3 things that's really going to position them perfectly to use what they have, leverage debt that they can access and put together a good plan or path forward. Then the third thing we're going to ask you about is your personal income, right? So do you have a W-2 job? Do you have a spouse or someone else in the household with a W-2 job? Are you keeping that W-2 job as you move into this franchise investor, business owner space, or are you going to kind of dive full in and need to take money out of the business? And then how does that compare to your monthly expenses, right? So the reason we're looking for this information is that with some of these funding strategies, there's different types of repayment requirements in terms, and we want to know how that's going to fit into your personal finances or affect your personal finances, and if you're going to have to pull money from the business or if you have additional sources that you can use to cover those life expenses, right? So those are the things we're going to ask you. We might ask you a little bit about your comfortability with debt, those kind of things. But once we lay that out on the table, we're going to walk through your options. So on this slide here, you'll see a bunch of them that we typically talk through. We start with the SBA loan because here at Reader, we have a philosophy of taking advantage of good debt. And so we really encourage a lot of people to go that SBA route, right? And what good debt means is it's got good terms, right? A good rate, good repayment terms, no early repayment penalties, and the interest on an SBA loan is tax deductible. So there's a lot of benefits to this debt. And I guess the biggest benefit that we kind of like to preach is that you're using this money to build a new investment, to diversify your investments without touching what you currently have built up, right? So rather than necessarily leveraging your entire retirement or a HELOC on your home for the whole investment amount, you can keep those pieces together, invested in the market, earning returns for you, and still have this business investment building up right on the side. So it's kind of making the best use of both. So we really do push SBA loans. A couple of things we talk about is the timeline, right? So the drawbacks of SBA are that it's a little bit intensive, the application process. It has a lot of steps, and the timeline's more extended than most other funding sources. So you're going to have 2 or 3 months of cushion before you have any commitment to open doors or anything like that to get through that entire SBA process. But that's a big one. We see, I would probably say 80 or 90% of the people that come through and work with us, they leverage SBA for some component of their initial investment. It's a great resource. It's so easy for a franchise investor to get in with an SBA loan and get approved as a startup, much easier than later on in the business life cycle. So it's a great time to utilize that. Otherwise, there's conventional loans, there's other types of debt service. If you've got a real estate portfolio, we might suggest a HELOC, depending on what your rate looks like and what your appetite for using those assets as collateral looks like. We can talk about 401k participant loans or TSP loans. This one is fantastic, one of my favorite tools to leverage. So if you have a 401k with a current employer, or if you're still employed in a government job and have a TSP, you have to be an active employee, but you can pull up to $50,000 as a loan from those accounts. And the really cool piece of it is you're borrowing from yourself and you're repaying yourself. That interest doesn't go to a bank. It doesn't go to a third party. It goes back into your account. So we really like to leverage that one, especially for, the down payment on an SBA or a smaller piece where that 50,000 might fit in under that, limitation there. ROBS is a really big one that we're seeing right now too. There's specific lenders in the space that can do it, only a few, because it's kind of a tax loophole, if you will, to get it set up. I don't like that term, but if there was one, ROBS is definitely one. And it's all about taking a 401k or a retirement account that you have from a previous employer and using that as the initial funding for the business, kind of rolling it into the business. It really is a powerful tool, but I would say we find that it works in a narrow field of scenarios, right? There has to be the exact right situation for kind of all the drawbacks of it, all the compliance, the cost to upkeep, to make sense for that to be the best funding option for you. But we do see a lot of people successful with a ROBS. And then otherwise, cash or liquid investments, how can we utilize that? If you have things we can pull out of, how can we minimize the tax or penalties from that to be able to pull together that initial investment amount? And another thing that we like to talk about that Chris kind of highlights quite a bit is the friends or family resource, right? Having someone in your life that might want to be a ground floor investor or provide an early inheritance or some sort of liquid cash or loan, related party loan that you could set up and have a lower interest rate, work with someone you know, access cash that you might not necessarily have within your bounds, but that someone you know and love wants to contribute to see you succeed. So there's just various ways you can go about pulling that funding. And like I said, it's really about putting together the right puzzle for your situation. I think we saw a few questions in the chat.
Yeah, I think Jose, I know you had one. You want to go ahead and come off mic and ask that?
Sure. Going back to the TSP loan, you mentioned about the borrowing up to 50,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what about a rollover? And you also mentioned you still have to be a current employee, like federal employee in this case for TSP. But what's the difference with the borrowing? Because I mean, I know the borrowing you have to pay back. It's typically gets done out of your check. But the rollover, is there such thing as rollover more than 50, or there's no rollover at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So the rollover is a completely different strategy. And what it's doing is it's taking the money out of your retirement account completely and moving it into the business, right? So you don't have to be continually employed with the business. You're taking that money completely out and moving it over. And then it's like almost kind of cutting ties with that existing retirement account until the exit when you roll it back in.
So Mackenzie, to be clear, if someone is currently working and their 401k is tied up with a current employer, they can't do a rollover for business startup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It can't be tied up with a current employer, just to be clear.
Exactly. It has to be an old, retirement account that's just kind of sitting with the employer. If you've rolled it into like a self-directed IRA, it doesn't work super well. It has to be with that old employer to roll over to the new business. Mm-hmm.
So sorry, and I hear, just so that I understand correctly, with the rollover and the TSP, I can roll over. Is there a limit on how much I can roll over? No. Okay.
Nope.
No. Okay. So
and in fact, Jose, I would say that another key is a lot of the companies that would, work with you on it typically would say the minimum would be like 50,000 or more to roll over. Otherwise, the fees just may not be worth it to do. But you don't have to roll over the entire thing. If you had like 700,000, you could roll over 350. And so that's what I did when I funded my first franchise. I had 650,000 and I rolled over 350,000 to start up the business and kept the rest in a retirement account. Does that answer your question? And so the 50,000 is kind of it's sort of coincidental that it happens to be, the maximum amount for the TSP loan is 50,000. Kind of the minimum amount for a rollover would be 50,000 or above.
Okay. And then do you guys know if you do roll over money out of the TSP, you can still continue contributing to the TSP if you're still employed while you have your business? Or
they will set up a new plan for you. So the reason you have to have a C corporation is because they'll set up a qualified plan to roll over that into it. And so, yes, you can contribute and continue to use that as your retirement account.
Okay. Well, that explains a lot. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And then Kurt had a question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to further clarify that. So I have, with my current employer and Fidelity, my 401k. I have my 401k with Ameriprise, which is the consolidation of all my former employers. So I can pull out of that 401k, designate a portion of that to this business, and it's not a taxable event. So,
So the way that a ROBS works essentially is what they're going to do is you're going to set up a C corporation, and what you're going to do is set up a retirement plan just like the 401k inside your new corporation.
I see.
And they roll the money from your existing 401k over into the business.
Yep.
So you're taking it completely out. It's not taxable because it's just going from one
retirement account
tax
to
advantage account to another. It's not a withdrawal in any sense.
Okay. Cool.
Kurt, it's a cool concept. and it took me a while to kind of understand it when I first heard of it, but it's almost like if you were to add your company to the list of securities that you can invest in,
Exactly.
And
which
then,
is really interesting because there's all these mutual funds and there's like Kurt Ocalia, if I pronounce that right.
Ocala, yeah, good.
Yeah, Kurt Ocalia, right? Inc. or LLC.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty. You're right there next to Apple and all the mutual funds you can invest in. But
And
that's
then you can take some of your net profits and put it in that retirement account with that
Well, you can invest it, or you can
you're investing in
use it exactly as your retirement account.
Yeah, got it.
And absolutely.
Okay, cool concept. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Carlos had a question as well.
Hi guys, you may have answered this already, but so if a family member has money in a retirement account, and that process of moving that money into a self-directed IRA to be able to loan it to myself to be able to roll out the business, how would that process actually work, or what are the steps within that, or is that something that I should discuss with you offline or more one-to-one?
Yeah, so there's a couple of nuances to the fact that it's owned by a family member, correct? It's under their name. Yeah, so if you wanted to look at the Rob's situation, you could utilize that, but they would be the share, like their retirement account would be the shareholder. And the way that Rob's works when you unwind or want to benefit from the business, you have to kind of work it in reverse, right? So the retirement account will own the company's stock, whatever, that's worth. You'll sell the stock and roll it back into the retirement account, and then it'll go back into it'll go back into a retirement account outside the business, right? So they would be an investor, and then when the business unwinds or when they want to exit, it would be back into their retirement account, right? So that's where it gets a little bit tricky with the Rob scenario. If you want to not use a rollover and just want to make some sort of withdraw, it depends on the types of accounts and how old they are, all those kind of things. We can talk through what the tax impacts of them just pulling that money out to kind of hand over to you would look like. But that's kind of the two different paths to go from their retirement account to investing in the business.
Awesome. Yeah, because I was worried about what are the tax implications, the actual mechanism. They graciously want to give us a lot more money than we expected.
That's great. Yeah.
And so it's a wonderful situation, but I want to make sure that it doesn't put them in a difficult spot come tax time.
Sure. Yeah. And there's a couple of different ways we could try and unroll that for you, or maybe they could use it to leverage some sort of debt on that so that they don't have to necessarily take the tax impacts, but then there would be the interest component. So we can kind of talk through the different scenarios. I think you and I actually have a consultation coming up, Carlos. Your name looks familiar.
We do.
Yeah, so we can get into the details of that.
I can't wait. I'm all excited. All right.
Hey, and Carlos, I'll just say too, most times, a lot of this stuff sounds very technical, and if you don't have sort of a finance or an accounting background or tax background, some of this stuff can seem very daunting. For some of you, maybe not, but for most people, the details of this can be very daunting and be a little intimidating. I would just say that for a Rob's, there is a level of compliance and stuff like that that's going to need to be. Most people will have. There's companies that just handle the administration of those types of plans, and it's sort of if it works for you, figure out the strategy, but you kind of outsource a lot of the admin. Sarah had one. Yeah,
I did, and I tell you, where people get themselves in trouble is they're like, well, I don't want to pay the fees. I can set this up and do it myself. And then they don't keep up with the compliance. Then they're audited and there's a tax event and an early withdrawal penalty. Don't do that. If you are going to do a rollover for business startup, use a reputable company. There's 3 or 4 nationwide ones. We have concierge partners that'll do that. They'll walk you through the process and you'll decide if you want to do it or not. But to me, it was just peace of mind that they were going to do that on my behalf.
Yeah. And especially with the Robs, with any of these funding strategies, you want to get that expert input, of course, and talk through the entire scenario all the way through your exit plan. That's another tip that I would make sure you discuss. What does this look like for you in terms of, is this a lifestyle business that you're going to, you know, own and operate, maybe pass down to family, or is it an investment and in a certain amount of time you want to sell or exit? Because that can really impact your funding strategy as well, as far as what that looks like. So have these conversations. But to Sarah's point with the Rob specifically, that one, it's most crucial to get, you know, the right people on your side to be executing it for you. The benefit of it is because it's, you know, interest-free, no taxable event. And if you do it wrong, it completely kind of undermines that benefit. And then there's, you know, the downside of the compliance. So you can end up in a worse position if you're not diligent up front, for sure.
Yeah. And one last thing on this, I think veterans sometimes have a difficult time, what I call letting go of the vine, right? We're all veterans here. And what I mean by that is when we're in the military, most times part of the training is learning the job of the people that we're leading before we lead them. And so it's kind of a lot of times a foreign concept for us as veterans to sort of outsource something that we're peripherally aware of or peripherally educated on to somebody else. But it happens in business all the time. It's called division of labor. So it's perfectly fine and perfectly acceptable. And frankly, we'll get to this later. Outsource all the stuff that is not your core competency. Recognize what your role is as the business owner and do that and do it well. And the other stuff can be outsourced to somebody else who can do it cheaper, faster, better. And that's the rule of thumb. But sometimes we have a difficult time getting over that in the military. Last thing, and we'll turn it back over to Mackenzie. These are great questions. They're a great conversation piece. She mentioned that I have an affinity for the last funding option here, and I do. And the reason is not because I was one of those people. My mother was a school bus driver, and my father died at 15 when I was 15, and I was the oldest kid. So ain't nothing coming to me after my mother passes. But there are $90 trillion amongst 75 million baby boomers that is estimated to be the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the world. The world, not the US, the world. Do the quick math, and that's an average of $1.2 million of wealth transfer that will occur from baby boomers to largely their children. And the opportunity there is and a lot of times that money is hidden. Y'all may have parents that you feel, or aunts and uncles that maybe don't have children that you feel like are real middle class and whatever. And lo and behold, they pass away and you figure out, my goodness, they had a lot more than I thought they had, because they don't show it. That generation didn't show it as much. And my point in saying all of that is they can't take it with them. You're eventually going to get it anyway. If you're in that situation, it can be very refreshing for them to be able to see that money put to work in a business that they can afford their children or their relatives to use while they're still alive. So I just want to put that out there. A lot of people are sheepish to kind of approach that topic, but it's there, and there's a lot of money going to be transferred. And if you can use it now, have at it. Anyway, enough on that. Mackenzie, back to you. And I think we're on the next slide, Sherry.
Yep. Perfect. Awesome. So one thing I like to highlight is this entity structure and funding conversation. They go hand in hand, right? I would consider them both step one. You have to have this conversation before you get into the nitty-gritty of signing everything. You have to have a plan, but you have to have both pieces of this plan, right? And sometimes the funding you choose dictates the entity structure, specifically in a Rob's scenario. So if you go the Rob's funding route, you want to roll over your retirement into the business, you have to incorporate, just by nature of how that tax-free event loophole kind of works. You have to be a corporation that the retirement account can buy stock in. So just knowing that up front, a lot of people start their LLC and want to do Robs, and they have to pay extra money to convert that LLC to a corporation. Just so have those conversations hand in hand up front and make sure you know what's required. But when we talk to people about entity structure, if you don't use Robs, you have a lot of flexibility to choose the entity structure that works best for your scenario. And for most people, it's not necessarily like a pros and cons checklist, what works best decision. It's more of a progression is how I like to describe it. So an LLC and S Corp here, the top two entity types, are called pass-through entities, which means that the business income or loss is going to flow to your personal tax return. It's tied directly to your personal finances, your personal taxes. And so this provides a lot of flexibility, particularly in years 1 through 3, typically, or even before you open operations, that year of setup and discovery and all of that. It's really efficient because you can take those losses that are inevitable the first year of business as you're setting things up, and you can offset, W-2 income that you or your spouse has, rental income, all this stuff. And there's just a wealth of benefit of those upfront expenses that you can capitalize on right away, versus this C corporation is a standalone entity, right? So it's treated separately by the IRS. It's taxed separately. Any losses or income stays contained in this entity structure. So it definitely at a certain point will make sense to be a C corporation when you're making very significant income through the business and you want to take advantage of that lower corporate tax rate compared to, the self-employment or personal tax rate that a flow through would afford. But it's really a progression. So LLC is going to be typically in 80% of cases the best place to start for that flexibility and the protection of the limited liability. But then, the self-employment tax piece is where the S Corp comes in, right? So once you're profitable to a minimal extent, maybe we say $50,000 of pure profit means that, hey, you're getting hit with these self-employment taxes that an S Corp can help solve. And then, the C Corp, once again, when you're having significant profit and that lower corporate tax rate comes into play. So I like to think of it as a progression. If you really do expect to have 50 to 100,000 of pure profit in your first year, you can go ahead and organize as an S Corp. It's just kind of like Rob's, where there's some compliance with that. You're required to run payroll, a few other things, keep certain records because you're a corporation. So it's a scale, right? Simplicity and flexibility to more of a rigid structure, but certain tax benefits at scale, at large revenue scale, if that makes sense. So for most people, I would start with the LLC, maybe S Corp if you're really expecting significant income right away. Anyone have questions on any of that? I saw a hand, I think.
I think Corey has a question.
Okay.
Mackenzie.
Corey? Go ahead, Corey, if you're here.
If you do a Rob's and start up as a C Corp, are you a C Corp forever, or is there ever a point that you can switch to an LLC or S Corp or?
Nope, you're locked into that C corporation structure with the Robs.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So
You're locked in because you have the plan set up and that, so yes. But when you sell it, you can unwind it, as Mackenzie said.
mhm.
And Mackenzie, I love what you said, which is figure out the funding first. I've had clients that are like, chomping at the bit. They set up an LLC and then decide they want to do a rollover for business startup, and they have to have a C corporation, and they kind of spun their wheels a little bit. So figure out the funding first.
Absolutely. Yep. And then when it comes to setting up this entity, the formation steps over here on the right. So the entity itself, you're going to set up with your state, right? So that's the first step. You'll get your articles of incorporation. Then you're going to apply for an EIN. That's the federal IRS sort of setup there. And then you're definitely going to want to make sure you look in your locality if the county or the city that you're in requires any special business licenses or things like that you need to set up to make sure that you're compliant across all levels. And then the other component is if you're going to be subject to sales tax or if you're going to have employees, there's separate accounts with the state that you need for sales tax, for unemployment insurance, for all kinds of stuff there. So it's definitely a checklist of things to look through. There's companies that will help you with this. You can DIY it, use Google, use ChatGPT, but make sure you're very thorough. We can help you setting up this, but a lot of the downfalls we see are people not doing that due diligence up front when they set it up. They don't realize they need a sales tax account. Then they're 6 months down the line into operation. They're 2 quarters late on their sales tax payments, and then they've got fees and fines and penalties associated with that. So really make sure you understand everything necessary for your business from a legal perspective with the state and with the IRS.
We have Dave Sanders, Air Force veteran. Are you down near MacDill, Dave? You're in Florida?
Yeah,
No?
I'm in Central Florida. I'm about an hour and a
Central
half from
Florida.
McDill.
Okay, cool.
Very good.
So couple things. I have an existing S corp, and I just want to kind of reiterate what Mackenzie said. Hiring people to do those kinds of things is the best money you'll ever spend. I have a CPA who has handled that for me for 10 years, and if they weren't there for the amount of money they charge me, the peace of mind is well worth it. One of the questions I did have, though, Mackenzie, if you have an existing S corp, and I haven't asked my guy this, so I figured I'd ask this question for everybody,
Sure.
is can I change the focus of that? For instance, I had an S corp and it's real estate, and I would imagine I could do a DBA, right, like a doing business as, and change it to something else and just keep that same existing S corp.
Yes. So you definitely can repurpose an entity that you already have. I would just say, think about if you're going to continue operations in that S corporation, the cleanliness of keeping them separate. And then I would say, if you're getting an SBA loan or working with any type of lender, to make sure you run that by them, because sometimes there's certain requirements for use of those funds that they would prefer you have a separate entity to run that through. Not necessarily a requirement, but definitely probably a best practice with certain types of loans to have a separate entity for a separate business function. Mm-hmm. Good question.
Mackenzie, one other question. Oh, sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
I was just going to add, Dave, you bring up a very good point. And I just want to be clear for those of you that have not read the FDD yet, typically your entity name, the only requirement is that it doesn't include any of the trademark names of the franchisor. That's what the DBA is for. So you would do SB, Service LLC and get a thing as Budget Blinds of Woodbury, Minnesota. That's how it typically works in a franchise.
Mm-hmm. Yes, great point.
Sorry, Chris.
No worries. Good follow-up. Mackenzie, Matt asked, does it matter which state that you form your LLC, your corporation in? Does it have to be the state that you're operating your franchise in? Can it be another state? And what are some of those considerations?
Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily have to be where your operations exist, but it will be where, I guess, you will have to pay income tax in wherever you have a nexus, right? If you have a physical presence or you do sales in a state, you're still going to have to pay income tax, sales tax, all of those things there. So you definitely will have to still file. Your articles of incorporation or where you set up can be in any state. So think about, where you would like to have that. We do sometimes create like an LLC in your state of operations and then kind of like an owner shell company in another state if you're worried about anonymity or sale or income taxes. And then we funnel it from this LLC up to the owner in Delaware, Wyoming, what have you, for the purposes of like protecting with that legal structure or, shifting income taxes around. So that's probably a better way to go about it, is to just have the shell company in another state, because you aren't necessarily going to avoid compliance in the state of operations just by moving that LLC, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Mackenzie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Dave, did you have a comment or a question on that?
I did. Is this an appropriate time to talk about piercing the veil, or is that something we should do offline?
I think probably a better conversation for an individual consultation, so we can talk about those nuances, of that question. But good topic to cover for sure.
And Jose, do you have a question?
Yeah, just really quick, and it was kind of related to Dave, but they covered a lot of it. One of them was the LLC or even the C Corp. When is it a good time to start? In this case, if I'm looking into the franchise. Originally, before the franchise, I was looking into self-started, right? But now, because my train of thought is LLC, can it ever be modified, especially when you try to get the EIN, the name of the corporation, can that name be modified? When is it a good time to start working on that, right? Because you mentioned even some folks might have taken 6 months or whatever. Is it something I should start thinking about now to start working on it, or just it's better when I know exactly what franchise I'm going to go for if I am?
Yeah, so I think it's probably better when you know the specific franchise, right? Because it's kind of a waterfall. So to be able to know what you need to fund, you need to know the franchise specifics of that initial investment. And you kind of need to know how you're going to fund the business to get that LLC or, you know, whatever structure set up appropriately. So I would say definitely wait till you have decided on a specific investment, but then you can go ahead right away. Not something to put off, because it can take, some states can take a couple of weeks to get it approved. So not something to try and do, you know, 3 days before your training or anything like that. Just keep that timeline in mind. Mm-hmm. Good question.
I have a follow-up question.
Mhm.
So the big focus for me is the anonymity portion, and you were talking about a holding company.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge I have is I've been in IT for a long time, and I watched during 2016 a specific company called Truth Social that got, you know, you keep hearing about people getting debanked, or in this particular case, it hit technology because AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, actually shut off services to that social media platform because they didn't like their ideology. So in today's culture, it's almost anti-Christian. I think it's super important, especially if what I'm trying to build is a Christian organization that and franchise that is projecting the will of Jesus Christ in a subtle way to continue the kingdom's call. But the issue I'm having is if you have a leader who prays and who talks, and that stuff gets out virally in a negative way, not being illustrated in a positive way, your company can suffer for that in ways that never used to exist 10 years ago, but exist today. And so I find it very fascinating moving forward in this juncture, to find a path that allows, you know, my faith to not damage the business moving forward, or those employees that I have on staff. You know, so I think that is the biggest crux that I'm asking the question. And you said a holding company, but I'm not sure that takes care of what I'm trying to solve for. So if you could elaborate, that would be amazing.
Sure. So I guess specifically you're trying to, with creating a holding company, what exactly would you be trying to accomplish with anonymity?
So like Wyoming is a state where you're not required to disclose who the owners are. Almost all other states require it. And there is a bill in Congress where they're trying to force it, but it was stopped by the judicial branch just recently. So there's a lot of really crazy stuff happening, that is a little disturbing from my perspective, but it all has to do with doxing people and trying to hurt their bank accounts or hurt them. You saw it happen in Canada, where the Canadian truckers were going on strike, and the Canadian government would shut down everybody's bank account because they wanted to stand up to the government saying, hey guys, you can't keep, you know, taxing us at this level and causing all of this strain on our financial situation, or we won't be able to truck anymore. So there are righteous events where I think companies and people are trying to do the right thing, but there are negative actors in the world market today that are literally doxing them and trying to damage them. And sadly, it includes the governments of the nations around the world. So I think the piece that has a concern from my perspective is just figuring out how I can navigate that in a successful way. So when I start up Amazon Web Services or Azure or whatever, I don't have to get deplatformed because I prayed in public one day.
Sure.
I
Sure.
just don't need that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess, so there's certain states, as you mentioned, like Wyoming, who they don't require the disclosure of certain information about beneficial owners. So it's a way to kind of obscure who the direct owner is of the business at its core, right? To have an LLC and then a holding company that owns that LLC. You can use a registered agent, all of that. And basically what it does is it kind of creates a shield. There's a business facing front of the name, the address, all of this stuff that people can access easily online. And it's completely held separately from the actual beneficial owner. There's never going to be a way to completely remove the beneficial owner. As you said, there's legal requirements. There has to be able to be a direct line to the beneficial owner for audit purposes, legal purposes, but it's more of a way to just kind of obscure it to the public, right? It's not easily accessible, that kind of information. And that's why using a high, I guess, like privacy type state like Wyoming helps with that, right? They don't require it to be so direct and upfront about who the owner is, but it still will be there underneath, right? There's still going to be a thread.
Right.
Does that help clarify what you're asking?
Well, the question you were recommending.
Guys, we're going to have to, sorry, Matt, we're going to have to.
No problem, Chris.
It's okay.
No problem.
Yeah, we've got about 8 minutes and I know she's got some stuff to get through,
But
but
Matt, I think that would be a great thing to talk about in a one-on-one consultation with Mackenzie or Michael. I think, and I'll make that intro on your behalf, my friend.
Perfect. Yep, that sounds great. We can get into it more in depth and dig into what you're trying to accomplish and the best way to do so. Awesome. Okay. Thanks for the question. Let's pivot and talk about crafting a winning tax strategy, right? So you have the entity set up, you've got funding, but definitely using taxes as an ongoing business planning component of your expenses is going to be super beneficial rather than just waiting and filling out the form at the end of the year, right? So being forward thinking about your taxes is going to save you thousands of dollars, right? And the way we see that manifest, number one, is when you start up the business, making sure you're capturing every deduction, right? Startup costs, franchise fees, market research, any cent you're spending on the business, you should be bringing to your CPA and checking if it's tax deductible and digging in, making sure you're capturing all of that up front, right? And then beyond the initial startup phase, year over year, you want effective tax management. You want to understand when to invest in certain things, when to bring income forward or push expenses calendar year wise, and all of those different strategies that can save you thousands on your taxes just by being proactive and understanding the cash flow versus the tax return, right? So in order to do that, the biggest component is your bookkeeping. And we'll preach that in this slide. And the next slide is you have to have the building blocks of your finances available to review. You have to track your expenses. You have to have some spreadsheet or software that you use that you have all of those details drilled out and you know what your cash balance is, what you've spent this month, what's coming down the pipe as far as expenses over the next few months. So that's going to be really important, keeping those books clean and then working with a CPA on an ongoing basis to make sure that you're capturing expenses as timely as possible to reflect on your tax return. Other important things, as a veteran-owned business, there's definitely some credits out there for you, usually on a state-by-state basis. So if you have a consultation with us, or maybe I can provide it to you, Chris, we have a new video on how to use ChatGPT to find grants or credits or things like that in your state to bring to your CPA based on your situation. So just really being aware of those types of things that might be unique to your business that might have a benefit. And then common pitfalls, I kind of touched on this on the last one, but know if you have to pay payroll taxes or sales taxes, ask someone, ask a professional, and know that up front so that you don't have to play catch up, pay fines, things like that. So definitely stuff to be considering before your first dollar comes in the door so that you know what your requirements are and what that cadence looks like. Any questions on that? Okay. And then just to kind of reiterate on the bookkeeping, unit economics is something that's going to be extremely important as a franchise. Just as I said, tracking that revenue, tracking those expenses and costs, and it's going to allow you to make critical business decisions. Number one, from the start, when we use those unit economics from the franchise that they provide to create your projections, we're going to be able to determine when do we expect you to break even, how long is your working capital going to last you, all of this kind of stuff. And that's things those are metrics you can continually track if you keep your own unit economics clean, your own books clean. And it's going to help drive success of the business in terms of, okay, can we afford to hire another person? Can we afford to buy this new piece of equipment? What can we reinvest in the business? All of that kind of stuff. You're going to need to really have good, clean information to make those projections, as well as to make sure that your tax return is accurate and efficient and saving you as much money on that end as well. Other ways you can use it, if you're looking to expand, open a new territory, you can use that to understand, where that investment makes sense, what you can expect as a timeline there. You can benchmark your territory versus others that you might expect to acquire, right, in terms of differences in market, and kind of create projections there. You can compare it against another territory that someone else owns and say, okay, what are they doing from a marketing perspective that could benefit me because their metrics look better in that area? All those kind of things that you can do to improve the business on a continual basis are going to be directly tied to the economics, the tracking of your financial information in a diligent manner. Most people use a software like QuickBooks. Sometimes when you just start up, it's a spreadsheet, but QuickBooks is really helpful. Having someone who knows that, they can automate a lot of it for you. Again, outsourcing what's not your core competency. If you don't know accounting, if you don't like budgeting, all of those kind of things, finding someone who can do that for you to keep it really clean and clear is going to be really critical and allow you to run the business with good information backing all of your decisions.
Okay. Mackenzie, that was awesome. Thank you so much. And guys, phenomenal questions. If you've got to break at 2, we understand. If you're able to hang on just a little bit longer, we're going to wrap up here quickly. But Sarah, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. So outsource everything. I think we've already said that. Stick to what you're good at and use your resources. The franchisor is going to have some recommendations on resources, and obviously as your coach, we will have some recommendations as well. Okay, let's go into the next. Let's kind of do a little pop quiz here, everybody, and go to slido.com and see if we have retained the information. So the first one is, what are the ways you can use your retirement funds to start your business? This should be an easy one. We're coming in with a pretty straightforward question. If no one is going to answer, I will answer on your behalf.
How do I?
Rob's absolutely. All the above. Okay, let's go to the answer. Sherry? Oh, okay. There is no answer, but it would be all the above. You know, that there's a loan, a withdrawal, and a rollover, and they are different things. Okay, let's go to the next question. Which entity structure is required if you're going to do a rollover for business startup? Absolutely. A C corporation. It is the only, just to reiterate, the only funding type that dictates the entity, and that is a C corporation. So if you're even remotely considering doing a rollover for business startup, figure that out first before you set up an entity. Okay. And then last but not least, what are the primary types? And you can already see a theme here. Okay. All the above. Absolutely. So I think that was a good discussion. And if you're confused and you feel like your head's going to explode because there's a lot of details around entity, funding type, it will all be clear to you. You could have a conversation with Mackenzie or Michael and chat about that. You can chat with an actual lender or a funding partner and kind of do a complimentary overview and talk about it, but it will become more clear. I had to hear about the ROBs 3 times before I got it. Like the light bulb went off and I'm like, now I get it. So if you're a little bit confused now, that's okay. You'll figure it out. All right. And then what is the main difference between a franchise fee and a royalty? This is kind of a good one for your figuring out what you have to pay. Absolutely. The franchise fee is the one-time fee. Typically, when you sign a franchise agreement, I would say in 99.9% of cases, you're going to sign the agreement and pay the one-time franchise fee, obviously less any veteran discount. The royalty is ongoing. That is the gift that you never stop giving, but you're getting support and other things for those fees. Okay. So we had a pretty robust Q&A. I think unless there are any other questions, that was very good. Go ahead, Dave.
Just real quick, I'm assuming like breaking out with you and Brittany, you guys will put us in touch with Mackenzie and her team if we want that.
Absolutely. So just FYI, I have already made a couple introductions and it sounds like Mackenzie already has one or two set up. If you want that, please let Brittany or I know. And Matt, I am going to do yours here like almost immediately. Okay. So guys, let's go into our breakout and we'll just spend like 5 or 10 minutes and answer kind of any remaining questions.